Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Backshed Bible Study. It is Cliff Carey here, your host today, coming at you from beautiful Fair Oaks, California, where it's a chilly 43 degrees outside and maybe 48 in the shed. Who knows? But this is episode 34 of the Backshed. I cannot believe we have been doing this for 34 episodes, which means I believe that we have been in COVID for something like 37, 38 weeks. So that's how I measure that. It is Monday, let's call it November 23rd, 2020. And I am thrilled to welcome onto the Backshed today a longtime friend of mine. And when I say that long time, we go back a good 20 plus years. And please welcome Nole Lilley to the Backshed. Hello, Nole. Welcome.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
It is. Oh my goodness! Like I can't tell you. I'm gonna have to take my glasses off so I can be a little real here. I have been looking forward to hanging out with you here for so long, and we go way, way back. And I was thinking the other day. I think I met you, which would have been my first summer working at Hume Lake on summer staff, working in the Fox's Den day camp program.
Yes.
And I'm guessing you were probably 11 years old back then. So yeah. I think that was 1994.
Yeah, that's right.
So Nole, I've been kind of pitching this over the last several weeks at church, and I've been telling people, I'm like, we're going to have an Army Ranger on. And one week I actually went so far as to say, this guy looked Saddam Hussein in the eyes. I have, that's was my catch to try to grab people in to join and watch. So, hey, before we get started here, I want to say hello. Good morning, Valerie Connor. Good to have you watching on board today. And Lynette Purvis, good to have you here. I wanted, for those that were on last week watching, and Nole, this is kind of a fun thing too. October was Pastor's Appreciation Month, and for many years our church, as pastors, we're like, hey, come appreciate us. Like, that's the lamest thing ever. And so we've never done this, but last year some people on our staff and our elders said we're going to start celebrating Pastor's Appreciation, and so people just came out of the woodworks and gave us like all kinds of cool gifts and gift cards, and they did it again this year. But somebody gave me this year, these just showed up in the mail last week, these gloves. Okay, and I talked about them last week, but they were given to me for working here in the shed when I'm like, because this is my church office when I'm at home, and they're the kind of gloves that you can still use your touchpad and move, on the screen of your phone. So these are my gloves. Love them. Maybe my favorite Pastor's Appreciation gift I've ever had.
That's pretty great. It's actually colder in your shed than it is here where I'm at.
And tell us where you are. You're in Lake Arrowhead, right?
Well, Crestline. I say Lake Arrowhead because nobody knows where Crestline is, but we're about 15 minutes away from Lake Arrowhead.
So Southern California. Yeah, Southern California. Tell us a little bit, like, where did you grow up? And let's do the little 2-minute bio, maybe 1-minute bio, and then we're going to dig into some of this other stuff here.
All right. So I grew up at Hume Lake, obviously. My parents are Jeff and Eugenie Lilley. Met my wife there, went off, joined the Army, did that for a few years. And then now I'm a fireman with Los Angeles County. I work in Whittier on a truck there. And we've lived up here, I think, for 5 or 6 years now. I think we're 6. So we came to the mountains because we missed Hume, and it was a good place to raise the family. We homeschool. I say we. My wife,
yeah, Heather,
wonderful, homeschools our kids. And
Heather is a very godly woman. That's
where we're at.
So, okay, so I pitched this to the church. I'm like, we got an Army Ranger coming on, and we're going to get into a lot of things deeper. But take us for a few minutes into what causes a kid that grew up in the mountains around Hume Lake to suddenly decide one day he wants to go to Ranger School and be in an elite, special forces, who's very well, given the time in the world, could go put himself in harm's way? Like, what happened?
Yes. So I grew up watching war movies like a lot of young men do. We were watching Bridge Over the River Kwai, The Dirty Dozen, those type of movies. And we would run around in the woods playing war with John Tilley, Chris Tilley, Evan Griffin, Brandon Setter, all the boys, all the guys you knew that you
Yep.
were
Yep.
familiar of. And when I was around, I think 12 or 13, my grandmother used to record stuff on VHS and we would take it home because we didn't have TV. And one of the things she recorded was a documentary from the Discovery Channel about Ranger School. And I watched that about 1,000 times because I loved it. And I had decided at that age that that's what I wanted to do. And I just kind of had committed to it since then. And so I went ahead, signed up when I could, and that's what I went to do.
So, um, this is so fascinating to me. So you did this in lieu of going to college. If I'm remembering correctly, like you finished up your high school years, your mom had homeschooled you.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, I'm going to go into the Army. First off, what did your parents think? And second, what went into needing to, what did you have to start doing to get ready for it?
They were both very supportive. My mom was a little more apprehensive than my dad, obviously.
Naturally, right? Good job, Mom.
That's appropriate. But they were supportive. Initially, when I told them, I found out now, I didn't know this at the time, but they didn't think it was going to be a thing because I wasn't a very motivated, disciplined child. I was lazy and I didn't follow through on stuff. So they just kind of thought, oh, it's a phase. But when it became apparent that it was going to be what I was actually going to try to do, my dad did take me out and start running with me. And we looked up what you had to do physically to be able to get in. And so we started working on those things because I hadn't really been an exerciser. Obviously, we were active, as kids at Hume. We would mountain bike and skateboard and hike and all those things. But I wasn't a person that worked out. So my dad helped me with that in the year leading up to going in. And never had really gotten into firing guns, so didn't do anything like that. Like we would go shooting every once in a while, like you do at Hume, like skeet shooting, or somebody had a handgun, we would go shoot it. But I definitely wasn't prepared for that aspect of it at that time.
So it's so fascinating to me because I think about, and maybe we'll take a little maybe we'll take a little turn here for a second. When you talk about how your dad worked with you, like he worked out with you.
Yeah.
Now, if I remember correctly, because for all y'all out there that don't know it, his dad was like the big boss at Hume Lake. There, you have little bosses along the way, but he was for most of my time working there. He was the big boss, and for full disclosure, Jeff Lilley, still to this day, if people say, Cliff, who are your mentors, people you look up to in life, like Jeff is probably the first person that I mention when I talk about just the influence that somebody's had on my own life. And but I still remember, and you don't necessarily know about this, but I still remember a time when I was talking to your dad one time, and he said, I kind of woke up one day and realized that my son was growing up. He's going to be an adult pretty soon, and I haven't spent enough time with him.
Oh.
And he said, I went to Nole and I said, I would like to start getting up early every day and working out and together. And your response, according to him, was, yeah, let's do it. I think you were like 15 or 16 at the time. I don't know.
Yes. And I do remember that. So I don't want it to sound like we didn't do that. That was just a different type. That was going to the little Hume gym.
Right.
And pumping iron, and he tried to teach me how to jump rope, and I couldn't do it.
Because he was quite the jump roper. I do remember this.
Still amazing at it. He's still amazing at it.
Golly.
But yeah, so I did do that. But in order to get ready for Ranger, we had to do other things. I had to run a lot and do. It
was a lot bigger tolerances that you had to meet, and So okay, so you end up and we'll, I think in a little while we'll talk about kind of a major event that happened early on in your time.
Yeah.
But you graduate from Ranger School. It's time to go out. What's your first deployment?
I can't get into the weeds on this, but I have to correct just in case someone's watching.
Okay.
I didn't go to Ranger School.
Oh,
I went
sorry.
to Ranger Indoctrination Program, RIP, which is how you get into Ranger Battalion.
Okay,
So
so we're not allowed to say
Battalion.
Ranger School.
Ranger School is a separate school that you do later.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not a
Thank
big
you.
deal, but
No,
some
no,
people,
no. That's legitimate.
some people care. Yeah. So I'm sorry. Your question was?
I have no clue. No.
We got
Well, take us to your first deployment. You were in Iraq and you're in Afghanistan at different times, right?
yeah. So Heather and I got married and we moved to Savannah on our own, no family anywhere nearby. And I almost immediately deployed to Iraq. We were in Baghdad mostly for that deployment. We stayed inside the green zone and then would go out from there and run missions pretty frequently. Not quite every night, but basically every night. Part of that was actually spent living in one of Saddam's side palaces. He had a palace on the Tigris River with a bunch of guest houses on either side that were all identical. There were like 12 on each side.
No way.
So we occupied one of those for part of that time. And then, we're just running missions the whole time. And for that one, we were specifically, our main focus was we were trying to find Saddam because we still
Right.
captured him. His sons had been killed in a battle, but we had not found him yet.
So what? Okay, now was it on that deployment when Saddam was captured?
Yes.
So what was that? What was that like for you guys? I mean, it's like the ultimate reason that you're there, almost, right?
Yeah. So we had this huge list of high value targets that we were going after. You may have seen those card decks that they were giving out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you gave me a few of those.
Yes. So we were going after those guys also.
Yeah.
But one night we were out in we picked up a guy, and it was interesting at that time. A lot of the people we picked up would tell us immediately, I know where Saddam is. And they were just trying to curry favor with
Right.
us. They didn't know. So sure enough, this guy says, hey, I know where Saddam is. Okay, well, we give him off to our intelligence people. It felt like it was credible. It was in Ramadi, so we didn't go. But the next night, the units that were up there went, and sure enough, they pulled him out of that hole. So the original plan was when they captured him, they were going to take him and put him on a helicopter and move him out to one of our aircraft carriers so that the Iraqi people could not kill him because they wanted to get rid of him.
Right. They were gonna deal with him
or
themselves.
something. Well, the top brass got nervous because helicopters were getting shot down, and so they didn't want to risk that. So they decided they were going to keep him, and they kept him in our compound because it was the safest place in Baghdad because we were within a perimeter, within a perimeter, within a perimeter. So they shut down our entire operation, and our sole job became guarding Saddam for a few
Wow.
weeks. So we weren't running missions. We were just taking turns being on various guard duties and keeping everybody out because once the general regular army heard he was there, a lot of people were coming to try to see him, like generals and stuff like that. We're trying to get in. And it was an interesting few weeks.
And so, I mean, you told me one time you did make eye contact with him, right?
Yeah. So my primary job then was running one of the FLIR cameras we had. So we had cameras mounted on these giant antennas, and we would be able to watch the distant perimeters just to see if anything was going on. But we're in the same building with him, and I had buddies that were in the room with him. He always had a medic in there with him, along with an interpreter and another guard. There were always at least 3 people in there. So at one point, my NCO, my non-commissioned officer that was in charge of me that day, he's like, hey, let's go meet Saddam. Like, we're here. We might as well meet him. So there were a lot of rules. You weren't supposed to go in there because, well, we won't go into why.
Okay.
But he opened the door and we stepped inside. We knew the guys in there. And Saddam was sitting there on his cot. He had been shaved by that time, so he didn't have that big scruffy beard when he first got captured. And he was sitting there reading his Quran, and he looked at us and just kind of stared at us for a minute. And then it was time to go. We couldn't, you can't say anything to him. So it was a really surreal moment because we'd been looking for him forever. You'd seen him on TV. And when you were next to him, he looked just like a grandpa. He just looked like an older guy. You know, he didn't look evil. I'll
Right.
just do that. But yeah,
And, and for all, for everything we know, he probably thought he was doing the right thing for himself and his people. But
he was very delusioned at that time. Some of
yeah,
my buddies that were in there with him, the medics, did have conversations with him, and he really didn't understand what was happening.
yeah.
He thought we were going to leave and he was going to be back in power eventually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that was, I thought we'd bring some of that up because that, a little bit of a hook. But um, Nole, the real reason I wanted to talk to you today is I look at your life. I look at things you've done, and I would characterize you as someone who has been incredibly motivated. You're a hard worker. I think you learned some incredible work ethic from your family growing up, and you're a man of impeccable character from everything I know, and conviction. But oh, well, actually, no. I want to set this up here, okay? I want you to tell us one more thing,
Okay.
okay? Because I want people to just see how hard of a worker you are. Um, you have a workout regimen that you do that may or may not involve some cold water.
Oh, the ice bath.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a second. What has led you to doing an ice bath, and what is the benefit of this?
Okay. So I've always, for the last like 8 years, I've kind of been on we'll say the fringes of the fitness and health kind of world. I realized that as a fireman, I needed to be in better shape. And so I started doing CrossFit specifically and eating healthier and all the things that go along with that. And I listened to a lot of podcasts. So I started hearing in these podcasts guys talking about taking cold showers and the benefits of a cold shower in the morning. So I started doing that, and it's horrible. It's really, really bad. I strongly recommend it, but it's awful. So I was doing that for a while, and then I heard about some guys that were actually taking ice baths in ice water, and how the benefits from the cold shower are just amplified in this ice bath. Muscle aches and recovery stuff. Because if you're an athlete, what do? They get in the ice. Pro football players do it, fighters do it. So I knew that side of it, but there's also a lot of really positive mental aspects to it as well, where it releases a lot of endorphins and hormones, essentially keeping it super simple, because your body goes into a fight or flight state. You get in water that's 34 degrees, your body is telling you you're going to die now unless you get out. So it stimulates that response. And as a fireman, we have a lot of job related stress and sleep deprivation. So anything I could do that would help with that, I thought would be worth trying. So we started doing it. My wife and I started doing it. We started out getting into the creek out here behind Lake Arrowhead in the wintertime. So we've been out there before where it's literally snowing, and we get in the creek for maybe 60 seconds to a couple minutes, and then you get out and try to get dressed. And then eventually it graduated to, we bought a couple of chest freezers, so the kind that open on the top, and sealed those off, put water in them, and now they sit at 34 to 36 degrees. And I do not do it every day. I try to do it every day that I exercise, and I do it at the station almost every day before I come home, because I notice that it really helps me kind of just reset from a stressful shift and then be able to come home and be a better dad. It really mellows me out quite a bit.
I, I think I'm tough because it's 50 degrees in my shed and I'm
Yeah.
hanging out talking to you, and you're getting into 34-degree water and disciplining your body to do something and to respond a certain way, and disciplining your mind, and I just hats off to you, man. Uh, so I wanted people to hear that, though, because that's something that you do. And that's the kind of toughness and stamina that you have. But the thing that is remarkable, Nole, about you to me is you've had to go through a lot of hard things, um, and coming back from war was not easy. And I think most people, we just don't understand that. Most of us that have never been a part of that, or have not been exposed to people coming back from war, we just don't get it. Tell me a little bit about PTSD and kind of the journey that you've been going on through that eventually got you to the Mighty Oaks, which we're going to kind of highlight here in a second.
Okay, so I think what most people don't understand about post-traumatic stress is that for most people that have signs and symptoms of that, it's an accumulative thing. So for most people, it's not one single traumatic event that causes you to have those responses to stress, which are normal, but that you have to learn how to handle appropriately and healthily. So for me, my deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, we didn't lose any of our guys while I was there. We had some firefights, and we had some guys get injured, and we had some close calls, but I didn't have that moment there that was very traumatic and would trigger such a thing like that. But day in, day out, going on missions, there's that heightened stress, and you're not with your family, and there's all kinds of other things going on. So, so that's a thing. And I think it's good for people to realize that you may not have been in combat, you might not be a paramedic on an ambulance, but if you have traumatic things in your life, you might need to start looking at, is there anything going on, and how do you get help for that? And obviously for me, the number one thing is a solid relationship with Jesus Christ is the first place to start. But depending on where you're at, you may need some actual help. Talk to somebody that really knows what's going on, and get some therapy.
Well, and so let's go back to you living in Savannah, and I mean, you guys are moved across the country. This is before you deployed to Iraq.
Yeah.
And you're on your own. You probably don't have a lot of friends that you've made yet out there, I'm guessing. You guys living in an apartment there or something like that?
Yeah, we rented an apartment off base.
Yeah. And how old are you at the time?
I would have been 19 and 20, turning 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Heather's pregnant with twins.
Yeah, so that happened. We were not planning on it. Found out about it like the first week I got to Afghanistan. Got my phone call, which phone calls when you're overseas at that time, where you're in a shed, not unlike your shed.
I don't like my shed.
With little banks of phones, little old like rotary phones, and you're sitting next to all the other guys, and you've got a time limit and sign-in sheets. And on the other end of that line, there's someone listening to you to make sure you don't say anything you're not supposed to say. So anyway, that's how I found out that Heather was pregnant, and it turned out to be twins, which was, at that age, we were terrified and of course excited too. But
right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So fast forward to the next deployment, which would be my last, to Iraq.
Okay.
The babies were getting ready to be born, like right as my company was deploying. So they left me behind. I got 2 weeks to be there while the babies were born and help Heather kind of adjust. And then I took off. So then I flew over and met my company. So for the first 3.5 months of the babies' lives, I wasn't there. Heather's mom came out and helped. So when I came back, they were 4 months, just getting close to 4 months old. They didn't know me. Obviously, they had no male contacts out whenever I was around. And then about 4 months after that was when our son Asher passed away. So we had Avery and Asher, brother and sister, and we woke up in the middle of the night, and Heather woke up and then woke me up, and Asher had stopped breathing. And by the time we found him, he was already, I don't know if we need to give a disclaimer for any of this part of it.
Yeah.
gonna get a
I
little
think we're
bit
all by
heavy.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was already cold, and called 911. Did my best to do CPR on him for 12 minutes. I found out later it felt like half an
Yeah.
hour longer. It was a very difficult moment because I had been trained in CPR at Hume when I worked at Wagon Train, but that was so many years before. And in that moment, I could not remember any of it.
Yeah.
I was trying so hard to like access those memories and I couldn't do it. So I'm talking to the dispatcher and trying to get them to tell me what to do. And it was the hardest moment of my life.
Right. And so at that time, Asher and Avery are how old?
7 months.
7 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have now endured the worst nightmare any parent can endure. You're alone as far as out there. You don't have family that's right there. Where you and I have talked about this a long time ago, but where were you guys, just even in your spiritual walk, in your marriage, things like that at the time?
Yeah. So growing up at Hume, obviously I accepted Christ real early on and always believed. But at that time in our lives, we were not really living it. We weren't living an immoral life. Like at that time, we weren't drinking. We were still going to church, but it didn't really feel like I had a very close personal relationship. I was just at that time kind of just getting by on my own strength, if you
Yeah.
will. So we weren't super solid. And we were so newly married that um, our marriage wasn't really that strong either because it was brand new.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we were at. And yeah, we were young. We were super young. And like you said, all of our friends there were guys from work. Um, so yeah, we didn't really have a support structure there apart from work, and it's the Army. So it's
Yeah.
it's a little different.
Right. It's not like those are the friends that are just going to immediately come and sit by your side and carry
Well,
you through it.
some of them might have, but they didn't even know. Like I didn't even think to call those people. Most
Right.
of you got rank structures and all that kind of stuff. And looking back, I should have reached out, but we didn't. I called my parents and let them know what was happening, and that was it. Until it came time that I was supposed to go to work, and then I did have to start telling people I'm not coming to work.
Oh my gosh. And obviously most of the people that are on here understand that April and I lost our daughter when she was 10 and a half months old.
Yeah.
And so this was in, and I believe, Nole, if I'm getting this right, Asher passed away probably 4 or 5 years before we lost Elise.
Yeah, he was 2005.
Yeah, and she was 2010.
Yeah.
We've decided we don't like years that end with 0.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, sorry, dumb joke.
It makes sense.
But I look back to 2010, and there was one of the people that I started interacting with not long after we lost Elise was you. And you having had gone through this 5 years earlier, even though I don't know, you're way younger than me, but I think you're like 13 years younger than me.
Couple years.
Just a few. But I like you just gave me hope, that I'd be able to endure. Even though this seemed like the end of our world, you were there at a time. There was one person out there that got it, and understood. There were very few people. I mean, Bill Carroll was one of those people too.
Yeah.
For me as well. I think he was living up in Idaho at the time, but called me. And that's of the tons of calls you get and people that are reaching out to you in those days, like the people that get it, the people that have gone through it, are the ones that you listen to. And gosh, where do we go from here? Let's rip the hearts out of everyone here. And
let me say this before we move on. The thing that I don't remember a lot, I have a pretty bad memory, but I do remember talking to you at that time. I don't remember what I said, But I do remember just being on the phone with you and knowing what you had gone through was, it was devastating for me.
Mm.
And other people that have lost kids that I've had the opportunity to talk to, I feel the same way. I feel an instant bond with them,
Yeah.
and just an empathy that you can't really explain, just
Right.
because you know, and it's different for everybody, of course, but you know what they've gone through. And yeah, it's like you said, those are the people that really, it means a lot, whatever they say, even if it's not, there's no answers, right?
Right.
But just the fact that, you know, you've been willing to reach out to me over the years, and it's always been super meaningful to me.
Well, in Nole, it's, I still think, so for all y'all out there's so many things. April and I purchased the house that Nole used to live in down in Clovis. And by the way, we inherited a green locker when we bought the house.
Oh, yeah.
And that's still in our garage here. It has moved with us everywhere we have moved since.
Proper. That's
And
good.
literally every time I open that stinking locker, I think about you. And April's like, should we get rid of that? I'm like, heck, no, I can't get rid of that thing.
That's awesome.
Anyway, sorry, I digressed way too much, but it's a bond that brings people together. And one of the people that's commenting right now, that's watching along on Facebook, is Donna, a good friend from the church. They lost a great grandchild 7 years ago. It was right after, I actually remember it very specifically. It was right after we had started, just barely after we had started coming to the church. But the at the time, you feel like, I don't know about you, my world just slowed down, like
Yeah.
time ceased to exist almost.
Yep.
And you start to wonder if you will make it, right?
Yep.
Like, how are you going to move forward? I mean, everything's I felt like I'm in a slow motion movie in the fog.
Yep.
And all of that. Well, let's go to this. Let's think about what kind of advice can we give people who are around someone that loses a child. You're in proximity in relationship with someone that loses a child. What worked for you guys? What did people do that was great, and what was not so great?
So our family was great, and they were supportive, and they were there, and my parents gave us that house to
Yep.
live in, which we would not have survived without. And people did reach out. My family did try to help us start planning like a memorial or a funeral, if you will. What we did, the flip side of that, is that we decided we didn't want anything to do with it, and we distanced ourselves from that and tried to not deal with it. And so I guess in that sense, what I would say the best advice is just be there, be present. And even if, well, not even if, you won't know what to say, and that's totally fine, just go be there, go help them with meals, clean their house, anything you can do that can show them that you care, even if it
Yeah.
seems insignificant to you. Those tasks, when you're in that moment, like you said, when your world slows down and you just don't know if you're going to make it, something as simple as having to put gas in the car can be
Right.
almost insurmountable. And yeah, I think
Right,
that,
because you're sitting there going, I don't even know what to do next. I can't even put food in my mouth.
right.
Much less.
And you've got a family also, so you're trying to care for them as the
Right.
provider, and
And
that.
that's a huge issue for people, is how do you take care of your other child?
Right.
You had Avery, right?
Yes.
And you had Avery there. We had Peter, and
Yeah.
we're just sitting there going, we can't stop.
Yeah, and you don't want to neglect them, but you're not 100% in the
Right.
that time. Not even close.
Not even close.
Yeah.
I want to take a moment and read something, and this may destroy both of us. This is an email your dad sent to me on the day my daughter passed.
Oh man.
Right.
Okay.
This may not be very wise of me to do this.
I'm in. Let's do it.
But this was so powerful in my life, and I think it's really good for people to understand. I was listening to your podcast a few weeks ago, and you guys talked a little bit about death and how afraid of death we are in our culture, and
Yeah.
and so on. And your dad touches on this a little bit, but I'm going to read this. So our daughter Elise had passed at it was in the middle of the night, on the morning of February 15th. And word got out, being that it was Hume Lake, word got out so quickly
Yeah.
of what happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were sitting in our living room at 6 a.m. and people just start flooding into our house.
Yeah.
And the phone started ringing and things like that. And someone had reached out. Your parents no longer worked at Hume Lake anymore. They were up in Seattle
Yeah.
by now. And because we had bought their house from them.
Right.
And but your dad reached out to me with this email, and it said, Cliff and April, I remember the pain, and Asher was only our grandchild. That all came rushing back into my heart the instant I heard. This morning I woke up just after 3 a.m. and laid awake, praying for various issues and concerns. You were not yet among them. By 4 a.m. I was out for a morning run in the cold fog. That's your dad.
Yeah.
Right? Who runs at 4 a.m, Jeff?
He's the only guy I know.
Golly, I hope he watches this. Okay. He says, something did not feel right, and I cut my run short, choosing to walk whole sections. I began to think of Asher, but I don't know why. In retrospect, I now believe that all of this was a spiritual sense of what was happening in your life at the very same time.
Mm.
I'm not trying to spiritualize something that was not there. I'm simply telling you that my heart was troubled and uneasy this morning early, and that my thoughts were about my grandson, Asher. I can tell you that we are praying for you. We are. I can tell you that we ache deeply for you. We do. I can tell you that time will help, but not for a long time and never completely. I can say that we are all the things we are supposed to say, and it won't help you at all. You simply must hurt and agonize, and we can't help you. We love you. We are there for you, whatever that means, and you are constantly on our minds, and on our hearts are heavy for you. And I've just got to stop right there. Like there's just this raw truth.
Yeah.
Is like, basically what he's getting ready to say is like, you're going to have to go through pain, and it's going to be awful, and I can't do anything to stop that pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So he goes on, but this is what you must know. The God of the universe chose to give you a precious life, a life that he would take back too soon, that would cause the parents great pain, and he chose you. The God of the universe knew yesterday what he would put you through today.
Mm.
Still, he chose you. The God of the universe knew how painful this would be, and he still chose you. Right about now, you are saying, stop it, God, stop choosing us. And for just a second, you are content that someone else should have this pain.
Mm.
And now compassion for others takes on a whole new meaning. But the price for this lesson is just way too high. Except that it was the God of the universe who decided you were the ones. This wasn't a council of doctors or philosophers. This wasn't because of something that you did or did not do. This was because from the foundation of the earth, the God of the universe was thinking about you, and he was thinking about a terror-filled morning that you would one day face. I don't know why. No one else does either. Still, you will ask why. You will pound your fist. You will cry out at the ceiling and into the night sky, and you will hear silence. I am so, so sorry. Use this for motivation. Live your lives for her. It's not that you aren't already doing something significant, but it will help you heal. It will give you a stronger sense of purpose. It will give you a tangible way to strike back. We love you. We miss you. Seattle's here for you if you need to get away. And then he says, don't hesitate to call Nole and Heather. Love, Jeff and Eugenie. Dang it. But like Nole, I've read that letter. I save it obviously because it's profoundly impacted my life 10.5 years ago. But I was so grateful for the truth that someone says that they didn't sugarcoat and goes, it'll be all right. All things work together for the good of all those who love him, called according to like blah.
Yeah.
The truth is it's going to be hard, and God takes us through like stupid hard stuff, right?
Yeah, and the truth behind that too, that apart from a miracle, we're never going to know why in this life.
Yeah.
There's not going to be some moment where you're like, oh, that was all for this.
Now I get it.
Yeah.
All right, it's all okay.
Yeah. And
your mom's watching, by the way. She's crying.
Sorry, Mom. And honestly, even if that was a thing, I mean, just to be totally honest, even if that was a possibility, I would say, I don't want whatever that is, stop. I don't care. Whatever that is, I don't want it. Let's take our boy back and not go through it.
Right.
So.
Well, and I've said several times, like, Bob Phillips, who's a man that, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You talk.
I should make a point, but I don't want to jump ahead. Let's make sure we talk about Mighty Oaks and like the last day, so that I don't leave it on that statement I just made, because it's not 100% accurate how I feel. Sorry.
Okay. All right. We're going to go longer than the 45 minutes we planned. Just so y'all know that. Although I listened to your podcast for like 3.5 hours, so it's good. So Bob Phillips, who you and I both know and respect very well, and he's another guy I'd look up to as an amazing mentor in my life. But I remember about a week after Elise passed that I was talking to Bob, and he's like, "How are you doing, Cliff?" And I'm like, "I don't know, Bob. You tell me." And like you're the psychologist here. Right. I'm not.
Yeah.
And he really looked at me and goes, "You're doing pretty well. You're doing really well, actually." And because I felt like a disaster, but what it was for April and me, immediately started walking. We started running. We started, and we started talking a lot about Elise. Like, we did things so we wouldn't lose her memory and all of that. Oh, Valerie, by the way, you are going to hear about the podcast. We're going to talk about that before we're done. Nole's podcast, that is. Anyway, so we just started going through necessary steps that we needed to go through. And so people kind of, word got out that Cliff and April are doing pretty well. And I remember somebody who you both of us know, who came up to me one day and goes, "Well, I feel so bad for what happened with you, but I know you wouldn't have it any other way." And I'm like, yeah, actually I would have my daughter back. And and there were parts of me that I really didn't like pre-Elise, like before she passed. Like, there were some character traits I had that were not the best, and that involved how I led people and things like that, and it really softened me in a huge way. And like, I wouldn't trade who I've become, but there are so many times where I'm like, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And boy, if I could have it my way, I'd have my daughter back.
Yeah, and learn those lessons a different way.
Right. God, is there another way you can teach me that lesson? Because but as we both know, it's like refining comes through hard. It's sharpening. It's pain. Fire. Right. So let's talk about that. So I'm sorry, I turned this into about me. I hope not.
It's about us.
It's about us. This is This is a couple of old friends talking. One sitting in the woods, one sitting in a shed. And oh gosh, okay. So now this helps set more context for the PTSD.
Yeah, that's
You'd
what.
gone
Yeah.
you'd gone through some major trauma,
Yes.
and add that to a career in the Army, add that to being a firefighter on the front lines. And so we're going to skip a lot of your firefighter experience, but now we're going to go, you see death on a very regular basis. You see tragedy on a very regular basis. Trauma is a normal part of your life. You've experienced your own, all that builds up. So now what?
Before we get too deep into that, real quick, also, I do need to say that after we came home from that loss of Asher, we did the absolute wrong thing, and we didn't lean into God. I didn't pursue that. We didn't memorialize our son. We ran away from it, and that over a period of 5 years just turned into a horrible problem and a lot of struggles in our marriage and some really, really hard times because we were running from it, but it was never gone. It was
Right.
always there. So then becoming a process of working up and out of that. But then also, like you're saying, even after Heather and I started seeking counseling and being involved in church again and really started growing in that way and started having some really positive growth in our marriage and seeing benefits from that. I struggled with alcohol for the first 5 years after Asher, and I stopped drinking entirely about 8 years ago. So that's been a huge positive thing. And anyway, but during that time in my fire service, also, I'm like you're saying, I'm still dealing with now these new traumatic incidents. Real early on in my career, I had a 11-month-old baby put into my hands that was in full arrest, and then I had to do the CPR and ride to the hospital and do the whole thing. So those events are happening, and then I had been told multiple times that I should check out this program called Mighty Oaks, and I was, it's not for me. I'm fine. I don't need to do that. Um, but I really started noticing that I was having a hard time connecting again with Heather and our little guy, Indy, who was probably 3, or I guess he would have been 4 at the time, wanted me to get down on the ground and play with him. And I really,
Uh-huh.
really felt like, though I wanted to, and I knew it was the right thing, I just couldn't often bring myself to do it. And I just knew I was struggling.
Yeah.
And I was having a lot of memory issues and just a lot of stuff was going on. So I looked into it. I I signed up. Oh, sorry, there's a couple of squirrels fighting in that tree right there.
It's awesome. It's one of them named Fat Gus.
Well, she should be.
All right.
So I signed up for this program, and Mighty Oaks is a peer-based, week-long, intensive. Um, Therapy is not the right word, but they basically take veterans and first responders, and they take them to a ranch somewhere. So the one I went to is in Ohio at a place called the Wilds, which is it's like a safari zoo place, but then there's this property that is set aside for that type of thing. A gentleman that was a veteran of World War II actually paid for all the lodges and the land and everything. A really nice place. So you go there and they immediately start unpacking, what's going on and why you're feeling the way you do and walking you through what post-traumatic stress is and how to deal with it. And they are a faith-based program. So
Right.
they are immediately pointing you to the real answer, which is you need to be focusing first on your relationship with Christ. And then they give you other tools and understandings of what PTS is and what it does to your brain and all that type of thing. But it was an incredibly impactful week for me. I learned a ton, had multiple moments, more than I could even remember, where I knew I could really see God's hand and feel it in the guys that I was with and the things that were said and how I ended up there. It was really powerful. But just real quick, I know we're short on time. 2 things that happened there that were most impactful that I'll share. It was about the third night, and we were in our cabin, And we were praying over one of the other gentlemen that was there with me, who I'm now friends with. And we were laying hands on him and praying over him because he was really struggling. And one of the other gentlemen that was there, I'm really cold right now, so it sounds like I'm very emotional, but I'm actually shivering.
So am I. It's all good.
I'm a little emotional. I'm a little emotional too. But anyway, so after we prayed, my friend now says to the gentleman who we're praying over, I felt like during this prayer I had a vision for you. And so he starts to share this vision. And I've been around a little bit of that at Hume, but not really a lot,
No, not
so I'm
not
not.
much in our world.
No,
No.
no. And so I'm aware that that's a way that God can work, and I believe in it, but I'm not really comfortable with it because I haven't really been exposed to it. But I'm listening and I'm like, that sounds awesome. And I believe this man, he's a godly man. And then after he's done with that, he says to me, Nole, I also feel like I had a vision for you while I was praying for this other guy. And he tells me that he saw an image of me doing CPR in the apartment on the floor on Asher, and that Jesus was there kneeling next to me,
Oh,
crying,
man.
weeping. And he said, I don't know what that means, but I feel like I have to tell you that. And I fell apart because I immediately knew. And I feel like God told me in that moment. He said, you've been looking at that moment your whole life as if you were all by yourself and you failed, because I've been feeling guilty ever since then that I didn't save Asher, because I felt like I knew CPR, or at least I should have known. And if I'd done it right, he would have come back. And I've been struggling with that and looking at it like, and even remembering in that moment that I was by myself. Now I saw it too. And it was, it was incredibly powerful. It was devastating, and it changed the way I looked at everything. And it's kind of funny because, I grew up a believer. I never stopped believing. So as part of that, I know that God is everywhere and that he was obviously there in that moment. But I had separated that away, and I'd been looking at that as if I had failed, and I was
Right.
just on. So that was one of the big things that I learned and that I carried away from that. The other thing was that at the end, they send you out to sit by yourself in the wilderness to pray and write some things down. And as I was up there praying and just thinking about what I had learned and getting ready to go home the next day, I just took a minute to ask God. I said, God, just, speak to me, tell me what you want me to know or get out of this. And I just sat there in silence for a little bit. And I very clearly felt God tell me, and this may be the only time that I feel like I actually have had God like speak something to me. Not that I audibly heard his voice, but it wasn't coming from me.
Yep. No, I understand.
And he said, you can give Asher and Paxton, who's our other son that we lost,
Yeah.
you can give them to me. I already have them. And so then I'm just bawling in the woods by myself. And I wrote that down. And again, another truth that I knew, but I really hadn't internalized it. And it's still something, I mean, that was over a year ago. So obviously I still have hard days, but those are two things that I've
Yeah.
been able to carry with me as truths and have helped quite a bit.
Right. And I'll never forget as a kid, my mom telling me, like, you belong to God, and I surrendered you to him years ago, and things like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes, we can say that, but in our heart of hearts, there's perhaps a moment when God tells you, no, they really are mine. And
Yeah.
you have the privilege of holding on to them for a certain amount of time, and but in the end, they're completely mine, and that changes your entire perspective on your kids. um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. uh, Mighty Oaks, I
Yep. That's a good
I
lesson.
I have had some heard some fantastic things about Mighty Oaks over the years, and for those of you that are a part of Sunrise, you may remember a young man by the name of Jeff Erkey that grew up in our church, and Jeff has some great connections to Mighty Oaks. He's the one who first introduced me to it. I want to do a short little screen share up here so you all can take a look at their website. So I have that on my my screen here. So that is right there. That is the Mighty Oaks. MightyOaksPrograms.org is where you can go to see more information about it. But there's a the thing that I think is really amazing about Mighty Oaks is, Nole, is that it takes men who normally struggle to really share about the big things that are the hard things that are going on in their lives and the things that have affected them profoundly, and it allows them to bring that out and just share it and be able to start processing those things, right? Um, and
Yeah, I think as men in general, we often have a hard time sharing that type of thing. But especially as the type of men who end up in law enforcement, the military, fire, those type A personalities of,
yeah,
you know, I'm fine, I've got it all together. We see it all the time in our job where guys will be struggling with something at home or a call we went on or financial issues, anything, and they will not share about it. And the only way you'll find out is if you notice that they're not acting normal and you ask them and ask them and ask them and kind of bully it out of them. So the thing that Mighty Oaks creates is an environment where all the people that are there have been through trauma, been through the program, have, you know, they've been at war or whatever
right.
it be. And so they're a safe place and they're not afraid to share their stories. And so then it allows you to open up and share yours. Excuse me. I would say for anybody that's watching and listening, if you know anybody, or maybe perhaps are yourself, that's a veteran or a first responder of any kind, I would look into the program. And if you
Yeah.
have friends that are, even if you don't think they're struggling, I would share it with them. It's a free program. People donate all kinds of money to Mighty Oaks so that the guys that go don't have to pay. And I mean, regardless of your level of trauma that you've had from life, it doesn't have to be just from your experience on the job or in the military. They will help you, and I would strongly encourage it.
Yeah, so I would encourage people to look into it. We all know people that are in the military or have come out of the military, police, fire, and in the trauma that's involved there. One of the best things you can do is talk about it. And to kind of close us out today, Nole, as I've alluded to a few times, I started listening to your podcast, and I get the sense that a lot of the reason that you're doing your podcast is so that um, other people going through same kinds of things in life can have a place where they can hear the voices of a couple of firefighters that are in their 30s who are trying to figure out life, and showing how God can carry you through things. So tell us a little bit about the fire you carry.
Yeah. So my buddy Kevin and I both decided we wanted to start a podcast. I had felt like I was being called to start one, but avoided the idea for quite a while because I just kind of felt like I don't really have a voice. There's a lot of people doing that better than I could. And so I kept feeling like I should do it. And then when I mentioned it to my buddy Kevin, who I work with, he said, I've been feeling the same thing. So we went ahead and started it. It was a 2-year process to get the thing off the ground. Um, but
The
it's
Backshed
launched
Bible
now.
study was about a 2-day process, but anyway.
Incredible.
Sorry, I
We're
digress.
like
Go on.
12 episodes in now, I think. No, no,
Yeah.
no. We're 12 episodes in, and next week we're actually going to release our episode that we did with Brandon, who actually works for Mighty Oaks. So it's another episode. If you're curious at all about more of that, did we lose a connection?
We lost it for a second, right as you said the episode where we talk about anyway. So yeah, why don't you go back there for a second?
Okay, so
Just
next week's
rewind
episode.
20 seconds. And now I'm losing you again, Noel. This stinks.
Next week's episode is with Brandon. Hold on.
It's all good.
It might be on my end. I may have to move. This is terrible.
While he's moving that and getting a better reception there, next week's episode is going to be with Brandon from Mighty Oaks, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah, let me see if it's better over here.
okay.
Very unprofessional.
Oh, you know what? Well, here, let me switch my camera. Who else? Oh, wait, I didn't mean to stop my video.
All right, I think I got a better signal now.
All right, fantastic.
So anyway, yeah, Brandon of Mighty Oaks is on our podcast next week. So he talks a lot more about the program and his experience there, if you're curious or know somebody that might be. But the primary reason that Kevin and I started the podcast was that we wanted to be able to speak to the guys that have a hard time opening up, have a hard time admitting that there's things that they struggle with, and just kind of being a voice for different ways that we can become better men, better husbands, fathers, that sort of thing. We are both believers, Kevin and I. So
yeah,
faith and belief in God and that aspect of it comes out a lot. But we are not just strictly a Christian podcast. We're also talking about health and fitness and ice baths and the other stuff that goes along.
Well, I noticed that iTunes categorizes you as fitness, I think.
Yeah, the problem with that, without getting too deep into the weeds, is that your podcast categories in Apple, which is where everyone listens to podcasts, they're very broad and there's not a lot of them. So we may end up moving it to, I don't know, something else, but that's as close as we could get. It's kind of weird.
Well, and so I'd like to put a little asterisk on this and a bit of a warning, because our average watcher on the old backshed here is a 65 plus year old female, and I adore you all, by the way. You know that, because we would not have anyone watching if it wasn't for you. So you are my friends, and you send me gloves, which I really appreciate. But there may be, keep in mind that this podcast is a little more directed towards some men that are kind of in their 30s and 40s and going through the craziness of life. And so every once in a while you might catch a few words that you don't hear at church.
A lot of our guests are not believers. So I'll just say it. You will hear some profanity. I do try to cut out the serious stuff, and there are some heavy topics already. So there's a little bit of nothing. Well, yeah, heavy topic, kind of like what we talked about today.
And I would, it's fantastic. There's a great episode with a man by the name of Brandon Setter, who's an old friend that I'm looking forward to hopefully having on here sometime in the next few weeks. So, Noel, it's been fun. It's been fun to watch your mom commenting on the side over here, by the way. So
I'm glad you got to watch. That's awesome.
I love Eugenie Lilley. Eugenie and Jeff did April's and my marriage counseling, which we are eternally grateful for. We still have lessons that we learned along the way that we got during that time. But my friend, I love you, and I have no clue how to end this conversation.
I love you too, brother. Thank you for having me on.
This has been a really cool blessing to share you with our friends at Sunrise and beyond, that are a part of this every week. And I thank you for your service, Noel. 3 tours?
Yes.
3 tours, 2 Iraq, 1 Afghanistan.
Yep.
Okay. And currently serving LA County firefighter in the Whittier area.
Yep.
And husband to Heather.
Heather,
father,
my wonderful wife.
Yeah.
We have Avery, who is turning 16.
Oh my gosh.
North is 14. And our little guy, Indy, is 5. And we have a dog now, Charlie, who's Charlie.
Yeah, and we were talking beforehand how you got Charlie and I got Sunshine right around the same time, and we both seriously questioned our decision.
Quarantine dog.
Maybe we could send them away together to learn.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of farm or something they could go live on, right?
Oh boy. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to close us in prayer, and then I'll stop the live feed, kick you all out, and Nole and I will wrap things up here at the end. But Lord, thank you so much for. I do thank you for the hard times in our lives. It's just. It's awful to go through trauma. It's awful to see somebody else going through trauma, and yet, Lord, I know it's in the darkest times that you are truly there, and that you are truly not just walking with us, but you're carrying us through those things. I can't help but just think of that picture of you right there beside Nole. On that just horrific night that they lost Asher, and to know that you're there completely, um, and have never left his side. God, I thank you for Nole and how you've worked and grown he and Heather, for how you've grown their marriage together, how you've grown them in you. I thank you for Mighty Oaks. I thank you for people that gave to Mighty Oaks to be able to make this possible. And Father, would you use them? And I pray that you would use Nole and Kevin and their podcast to reach people that would never walk into a church, and that they would be able to hear the good news and the hope that is in you. And thank you, God. In the name of Jesus, we pray all of this. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the Back Shed. This has been amazing. I want to remind you that we do not have any of our normal offerings the rest of the week online. So don't tune back in on Wednesday for Pastors Live. We won't be here. Don't tune back in Thursday for the Luke Miller podcast. It won't be happening either. Hope you have a great Thanksgiving. God bless you. And I'll see you next week back here on the Back Shed. Bye-bye.